Hey guys, we're gonna give a few minutes for everyone to get on. I want to thank you while you're getting on for being a part of this Facebook Live and our YouTube channel as we continue to try to help individuals understand how important it is to build a cooperation and a partnership between the pulpit and the pew and clergy and congregation. And of course, this particular live is called Pastors Are People Too. And we have some great men here today that's going to share with us from their heart as it relates to our responsibilities as pastors. Many times we get it confused with just another job, and we're called by God for ministry. And ministry cannot be confined between 9 and 5. However, there are a lot of people who have that idea, and we want to try to address it for each and every one of you today. And so we have today two tremendous pastors that I'm going to introduce. It's Pastor Mike Woodberry from the Unity Baptist Church here in Oklahoma City, and then of course Pastor Michael McDaniels of Northeast Missionary Baptist Church, two tremendous pastors who not only blesses the city here in Oklahoma City, but around this country. They have even shared the gospel and shared their stories and shared their conviction about Jesus Christ. And so we're going to jump right into this and then allow them first to introduce themselves to you and give you a little background on their ministry and what God is doing. So Pastor Mike, if you'll start with the Unity Baptist Church, just kind of give us an idea of how long you've been there and maybe a few things that you all are doing there as we move forward.
Thank you, Pastor Gaddis. It's a privilege to be here and to have been asked to come on with you at this particular time. Very important subject matter. I've been at Unity actually for about 25 years. I've only been senior pastor for the last 15 years. A lot of that time was spent co-pastoring with the late Dr. Eric A. Mays. And we're doing a number of things at Unity. Some of the things that we're doing is the same things that were being done before, just kind of a new twist. We just started something new on yesterday called frangelism, a new type of evangelism, F-R-A-N-G-L-E-I-S-M. Frangelism, and that's an acronym, and what it stands for is friends, relatives, associates, and neighbors. And everybody in the church, since evangelism should be done by everybody, we're trying to incorporate every family to select a day and bring your neighbors, bring your associates, your employees, whomever, bring them to church. Let's fellowship with them, get to know them, and let them get to know us. And so we're trying to do some different things to kind of broaden our scope, you know.
Absolutely, and that's so wonderful because it's important, because those things don't just happen. Right. They don't drop out of the sky, and it takes a lot of work. All right, Pastor McDaniels, if you'll share.
Michael McDaniel. I've been in Northeast now for 11 years, and it's been cool. And to be honest, Pastor Gaddis, I don't know if I'm doing anything differently. I'm doing some of the same things, honestly, that you did.
Yeah.
We're going to have an Easter extravaganza. I almost went to Rose State, but we're just going to host it at our church. I'm cheating.
Amen.
So to be quite honest, we're just doing what we think. We throwing it on the wall, and if it sticks, great. If not, we'll go to the next thing.
And it's important, and because that's what ministry is all about.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I have to share with people, as pastors, we don't have no book You know, it don't drop out the sky, the book of pastoring and leading God's people. We just kind of try to feel what God is saying and leading us to. And like many times, like Abraham, when God told him to leave, he just told him to leave. And I'll tell you, when you get there, and as pastors, many times that's the case. All right. So I want to just talk about, first of all, as we deal with the subject of pastors or people too, especially this 9 to 5 piece that we're dealing with tonight. I want us to talk about a little bit about the difference that you see between your predecessors and yourself. You said you shared with with Pastor Mays some years, and and then you were with Pastor DeWitt Rowland, and then Pastor McDaniels. You were with of course your cousin Pastor J.L. Mitchell, but then also Pastor Bailey in Tulsa, and then
Pastor Kim Brown.
That's right, Pastor Kim Brown at Ebenezer. So you've been under several pastors. So when you look at their leadership, and you look at pastors, and I always tell people that when Pastor Cooper, who was our predecessor here at the Greater Bethel Church, when he left home, nobody could reach him until he got to the office or he went back home. And I kind of miss those days sometimes. But that's why the office phone was important. And so it has changed tremendously for me. So Pastor McDaniel, would you start and just tell me what you think that, the changes have been, if Pastor Bailey and Pastor Kim Brown and all those, they would talk to you now about your struggle as a pastor.
Well, listen, all of those guys have been seriously influential to me. And I see myself as a bit of all of them. Pastor Bailey, Pastor Kim Brown, and not to minimize Pastor Jeff Mitchell, but they were large personalities. Yes. They were people who just embraced people, who were just magnetic, who loved on the people, who, whatever they did or whatever they did not do, they did love on people tremendously. Pastor Mitchell, that's just not his overwhelming personality, but he does love his people, and they understand that. But his is different. It is, I care. He's going to be at every place, but his presence is not going to soak up the entire environment. Pastor Bailey and Pastor Brown, absolutely, it's them and hard for anybody else to be in the room.
Everybody kind of shrinks.
Yeah, everybody shrinks.
Kind of like John the Baptist when Jesus came on the scene.
Yeah. So, I've embraced some of those things. I think some of those things are great, but I pray that I can find the balance, because I can't be Pastor Bailey, cannot be Pastor Kim Brown, I cannot be Pastor Mitchell, but I hope I can find this balance between, as one pastor friend of mine says, being available but not always being accessible, right?
Oh, great.
So I'm learning that availability does not always mean accessibility. Yeah. And I see one of the questions down here, people have left and fallen out with us because we didn't meet that expectation of accessibility, right? And I think the pastor has to continue to negotiate that very serious landmine about being available to people, but not always being accessible.
And I think it's important when we talk about that, it is important to educate the congregation, because no other professional in their lives are always accessible to them as customers, as clients, as patients. But yet, when it comes to the church, they want you always to be always there for whatever it is they need.
We've done, as pastors, a poor job of fostering and promoting that paradigm. Yeah. Because we feel the call, and it's hard not to be when you care.
Yeah. Well, and but also I think that we have to understand the call. I think a lot of times we step on, I believe, for the sake of a better terminology, we step on God's toes or the Holy Spirit's toes, because there's some things that we try to take on that really isn't our responsibility as their pastor and leader, and we handicap them because of the fact.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree totally.
Yeah. So, Pastor Woodberry, what do you think as you talk about your predecessors in the idea as Pastor McDaniels said? Well, he realized that he couldn't be them.
Right.
But in your case, following that great Pastor Eric Mays at the Unity Baptist Church, what do you think?
Well, it was interesting because going in, I had the privilege of being able to share with him in the co-position. But going in to the pastorate, he and I had a conversation, and I explained to him, well, I cannot be you, and I'm not going to try. I'm just going to be the best me that I can be. And he understood that. Dr. Mays' background, he was a secular educator, taught school, but because of that, he was very rigid. I liked his study habits, and he taught me a lot as it relates to, you got to put the work in, you got to put the study in, he was very rigid about that, but my background was totally different. I came out of a managerial background, which was totally different than the teacher background, but I was able to learn some things from him, even though I cannot mimic or do exactly what he did. I can just learn from him and incorporate it into my own style. And that's what I've tried to do. That's what I've built on. People have asked me about my style, and I tell them that, as Pastor McDaniels said, it's kind of a compilation between the men that I served with and under and my brothers. It's kind of a compilation. I learned from all of those individuals, and so what I am is kind of an amalgamation of all of them.
Yeah, Pastor McDaniel, you mentioned something, and that later on we want to talk about. But I want to talk about that piece on being available and not always accessible. What does that look like in the ministry today for pastors who are pastoring now in the year of 2020?
We have to make hard decisions as it relates to, are we going to be present, or are we going to be present vicariously? Or are we going to be present via media, via telephone, via text message? Some people may assess that is shortchanging. But if I'm on vacation and someone dies, is it appropriate for me to neglect my family, to pick up camp and to come back earlier than what I've originally decided? When you make those hard decisions as pastors, people are offended. You didn't come back for my mom or my dad or my brother or my wife. And they really neglect or to not think about the time and preparation that it went into, and trying to decide the time that I would even take away from your mom, your dad, to go be with my wife and my children. That's what I mean. So excessive availability means I pick up the phone. Hey, I'm praying for you all. The team is in place. We want to love on you. We want to do the very same things that we would do if I was there. But I'm not going to make it. And and I think we as pastors got to grow to the place where we understand that and not feel like we've shortchanged people. Because I've been there. As a pastor, I've been pastoring nearly 17 or nearly 18 years now. And there are moments that I said, baby, we got to go.
Yes.
If you feel led and feel like that's what you need to do, cool. But there's sometimes I only did it because I didn't want to deal with the ramifications of somebody being mad at me at the church.
And I've experienced it here. Just there was an instance where, as you said, Pastor McDaniel, my wife and I were on a plane. We had actually boarded the plane when we get the call that a distant relative had passed, And it was our anniversary. We were headed out of town, and the family expected me to forego this vacation and this time of anniversary celebration, commemorating a special time in our marriage, to forego that, like get off the plane and come, and they left as a result of it. But I never, and I had to deal with this idea of, how I felt about that, because there's several different emotions that are sparked by that. But I think it's important as we begin to look at this pastoring in this day and time. They utilize all the social media. They utilize text messages and emails and FaceTime and all those things for every other reason.
That's right.
And a lot of times we could probably possibly use that for pastoring and being able to shepherd God's people. What do you say, Pastor?
And I agree with you, and I really appreciate both of y'all. What you've said has helped me because of the fact that I've had that experience. 1 year, and to be real honest with you, we're just being honest.
Yes.
My daughters kind of resented me because at least 2 times that I can remember, we were on our way on vacation. One time going to Denver, Colorado, I got a call, and I turned around and came back because of the death. And they really resented me, and I understood that. Because it's my work. It doesn't have anything to do with their work. But I can understand from a family standpoint, they had a right too. They had a right. One time, just a couple of years ago, I had been invited to Roswell, New Mexico to preach. We're on our way. I'm in Amarillo, Texas, and get a call that somebody died. We went on to Roswell, but we had to kind of hurry back because of what happened. And there is, if I can be honest with you, I don't know about most pastors, about you, but I know that there's a little bit of resentment when you have to come back and cut your plan short because of something that happened. I understand my job. I understand that I'm supposed to minister to every family, and I have a great sensitivity for that. But I'm a person too. Yeah. Okay.
And it's important because
that's the title.
That's the title. That's why we do pastors are people too.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to come to the realization that while you are greatly concerned about those that you shepherd, they in turn ought to be greatly concerned about you as well. And that's one of the things that God has given us to kind of help share with churches and ministries, that it's important that the sheep know where to come when they need their shepherd.
Yeah.
But where does the shepherd go when he needs a shepherd? And somebody needs to care for the shepherd. And so this is important, as this dialogue is important, that we actually struggle with that. We actually struggle with, do I say no to my family to say yes to a family in my church? And then if I say no to my family and say yes to the church, and we understand our responsibility in the church, but do we not have a responsibility, Pastor McDaniels, to our family as well? You got a responsibility to the children in the church, but don't you have responsibility for your own children? You got a responsibility for marriages in your church, but don't you have responsibility in your own marriage?
Yeah, we do. And sometimes we've neglected, and I say we, I can only speak for me. And sometimes I've neglected that responsibility. And just like your daughters, I'm sure my children. And I appreciate, Pastor Gaddis, what you do in terms of some of your writings, in terms of how to appreciate and love your pastor. Pastor Brian Carter did a whole series on how to take care of your pastor. And I think we need people who will help us to say, Pastor, let this be your priority. We need people to come alongside of us and to affirm and confirm. I have deacons at my church who always say, Pastor, don't neglect your children because they're only going to be children for a certain amount of time.
Yes.
That's great.
There were times that I would go drive to Kansas City, watch my son play Friday, Saturday, and jump up Sunday morning and drive back from Kansas City to be at church to preach, or to Dallas, or to Wichita. Because I wanted my boys and now my daughter to see my investment in them, but I also wanted to get back, right? And I didn't want people, man, I got my kids' cell phones at age 8 or 10
I know. Yeah.
because I didn't want to be without direct communication with my child. And so we have to, man. We have to. And I think I had lunch today with Rodney Phelps, the pastor of the North Church. Started it in his living room nearly 18 years ago. Location in Oklahoma City, Shakota, as well as Guthrie. Extended to Deer Creek, but they closed it. 18 years, man. He now is in a position where, yes, he preaches a lot, but he has many people under him. And they got the video stuff going and all that kind of stuff. We think people won't accept it, but they will.
Yes.
We have to help people understand that I'm going to extend myself to you, but at the end of that extension, I'm done because I have other priorities.
Absolutely.
Not that to minimize you, but it means that I got to do some other things. And I think we have to be bold enough in our faith, comfortable enough in our context, and for our people to understand who we are. And I think our people grow to appreciate that. Like if I say I'm going somewhere with my kids, I think I won't have an issue at my church. I think they've grown to understand. Pastor's gonna go support them kids.
Right.
But earlier on, it was a fear. It was I can't do it, and because I've seen so many other people do different things. But we have to, man. We have to.
And it's important. And I think that as we grow and develop as Christians, then we're able to help them to grow. And many times I think that the problem that really exists in the pulpit, because I think that we can educate the people in the pews about everything else. You know, we teach them how to come to Christ. We help them understand how to be saved, and we teach them how to be discipled and what it looks like to be more and more like Christ. We teach them about tithing. We teach them about parenting. We teach them about all these different things that we are able to teach them about. But there is this awkwardness, isn't it, when it comes to teaching the congregation how to care for you. And we got to make sure that we help them understand that as much, because their blessing is tied to the person and the personality in the pulpit, I believe. And so what do you think about that when we talk about how do we educate the people in the pews about the life and the ministry of the pastor?
You know, I just like you said earlier, I think that's a great idea. And I can admit that I'm derelict in my responsibility of helping the church to understand that about me. I've not done that well, you know. I remember the late Dr. Mays in his lifetime, me and him had a conversation. He wrote the book on deacon training. And I brought up to him one time, we were talking, his book is very good on training men to become deacons, but the congregation is not trained. So if the congregation is not trained, no matter how well trained the deacons are, there's still going to be a problem. Because they don't understand how to deal with trained men and what they're trained to do. You understand what I'm saying? And so I think it's the same thing in our case.
Yeah. Pastor McDaniels.
No, and I agree. But here's what I want to expand it further. It's hard for us because there's an air of selfishness or an idea of people are going to assume that we're trying to insulate and make our position better, right? So we always feel like that somebody's looking at us, that they're thinking that we have this ulterior motive if we tell you or teach you how to take care of us, how to honor us. But in essence, we're really saying, if you help me do that,
That's right.
I can be better for you. I talked to Pastor Fouts today, and I hate to keep bringing his name up, but he started this church in his home. You know, he said for 10 years he didn't have not life insurance, but health insurance for his family, or 7 years. Then he got it, blah blah blah. But he reiterated to me several times a day, I'm well taken care of now. I gotta tell him, don't give me no more. Let's help everybody else. And I want to get to that point where people are in tune to what the pastor needs, right? Yeah. Pastor, you and your wife go do something. But we in this culture and tradition and context, to say anything about us, we feel like people assume that we're trying to make it better for us. Yeah. Right? But the more refreshed I am, the better I'm relaxed and my home life is better. Not that they can control any of that, but to be sensitive to my family, to my wife, to my children, it really makes me a better pastor. Yeah. It really is going to help me help you. Yeah. Right? Not that it's your responsibility necessarily to correct every wrong or to solve every issue, but it is to say, how you doing?
That's right.
How you and the missus? How you and the kids? How can we serve y'all? Right? And not think that we think that we are above the earth, or we think that we all of that. No, we're not. We're just people who've literally committed our lives, and we live in front of you. You get to see our nakedness and all of our jacked up stuff.
That's right.
Like, I would cuss, but there's too many people watching. But that's how I feel sometimes, right, man. It's like that gum. I am human, just like you.
And that's why we are here. That's why I will not and I can't, because I believe that God has placed this in my heart and has called me to do this, because it's important. Yeah. Because here's the flip side of that. That if your marriage began to look bad, and I'm choosing words carefully, when it starts looking raggedy and it starts looking bad, and then people start looking at, then they're going to accuse you of not doing something, when in fact it is not you. It is simply the makeup of the church is not willing to allow you to be the husband that you need to be, or the father you need to be.
And sometimes it is us.
Yeah, it is.
Right? And sometimes we need space to correct it or to do whatever, right? But it is to say, quit looking at me as if I'm some freaking superhuman. I'm a dude that stands and squats and does the same things that you do.
That's right.
I make the same dumb, behind mistakes. I inadvertently put my proverbial foot in my mouth. And listen, I'm still called.
And here's the problem, however. The problem is that most people never see that in the pulpit. Let me give you an example. Some 15 years ago, when I became senior pastor, I was always one of those guys who never enjoyed the pulpit. I never enjoyed sitting in the pulpit. Thank God for those pastors who still do. But I did not. I wanted to be in the congregation worshiping with my people. And so we had the big wood pulpit that Pastor Cooper preached behind, and they paid good money for, and chairs that, and we even had them reupholstered and everything. And the moment they had them reupholstered, I said, we're moving all that out. And I moved it out, and we first we had a plexiglass podium, and then we went to the wrought iron podium. I moved it, and I'll never forget, the young adults in our church said, wow, Pastor, I'm just so glad. It just makes it so much freer to worship, because I always thought that the bad people sat out here and the good people sat up there in their minds, but also positionally sometimes in their mind. And so they'll look at us as if we are super, or we are better, and we're just not like them. And so, and sometimes we'll play into that. We'll play into the fact that I'm super. We'll play into the fact that I don't hurt like other people hurt, and all of those things. So Pastor Woodberry, when you think about that, and you how do you think that you're able to show that, and how do you help your congregation understand that you're a single pastor?
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because my dynamic is kind of different.
Yes.
and that's one thing that I have to insist is that they allow me to be who I am. I'm not single by choice.
Yes.
That's right. If I had my brothers, my wife would still be here, but she's not.
Absolutely.
So I have to go on, pick up the pieces, and keep moving. But one thing that you said, I never will forget. You were talking about moving the pulpit and doing something different. I had to take a managerial class one time, and the one thing, I don't even remember the name of the class. I was in Toledo, Ohio, but what I do remember is they told us, they said, you need to come from behind your desk and sit out there and talk to your people, because otherwise they will always see you as being superior to them. Come from behind your desk and sit out there knee to knee, toe to toe with them, so that they will understand that you all have something in common. And whatever it is that you're trying to get across to them, you can do it a whole lot better from that position, And so I totally get what you're saying. Sometimes I still struggle with helping them to understand, because, we're studying right now on the gift of singleness, because it is one of the spiritual gifts mentioned in the Bible, the gift of singleness. And the truth of the matter is most of us preach to more single folk than we do married folk. But we don't know how to minister to single folk. And so I believe the Lord allowed me to have this gift for a season so that I would learn how to minister to them and teach them how to minister to me.
And they're able to see those things, and it's important. Pastor McDaniel, you mentioned about how much better you can be as a pastor as a result to them seeing you as first of all a man of God, and all those things. How do you do that? When you talk about that, what does that look like? I know, because I wrote a book on it, shameless plug, on We Win When We Pray for Our Pastors. But to tell them what share with the people what you think about, how does that affect you? How does that make it better?
Well, the truth of the matter is that I think one of the things that God has allowed me to do is to be transparent.
Yeah.
I think once people see and know who you are, right? I think this ideal of perfection in the pulpit is a farce. I think the reality is that for me to pull down and the all of the stuff in the pulpit and go down to people, it was never about me being superior. That wasn't my idea. My idea was I was tired of you looking at me, and I was really tired of looking at you.
That's how I felt.
I just really wanted to just be at church. I just wanted to worship, because I understand, as I sat out there for years and I looked at people, that you think too much. You calculate their socks, their shoes, their suit, their mannerism. It's too much about that. It is, and before they even get to preach, you've already made a predetermination about who they are and what they are. And it's like, stop. And so I just wanted to be able to sit out there, to engage in worship, and then to go up to preach, and then let somebody evaluate me in that moment, and don't get to do all of these pre things. So, but the truth of the matter is, it helps you, for me, to let people know who I am, to be honest, for them to know my humanness, right? It is, Ralph West set me free when he said one day that before I was preacher or pastor, I was a Christian. And so just like you give effort every day to be the best Christian you can be, because I got a call to pastor doesn't mean that I'm no longer a Christian. It doesn't mean no longer do I struggle with everything that you struggle with. It just means I got a call, and I'm positionally different, but personally no different.
That's right.
And so it helps me to let people know I'm Michael, Mickey, whatever that is, before I'm Reverend and Pastor, right? And so support me that way, and support me becoming a better pastor, and a better man, and a better husband, and a better father. I wear my mistakes, I wear my shortcomings, but I also want to wear that we all are where we are by the grace of God. I don't care if that's the pulpit to the back door. By the grace of God, there go I.
And it's important and I appreciate you sharing that, because it's important for our congregation to understand we need worship as well. We don't just come and work. Most people think, oh, you just work one time, you just work 1 hour or 2 hours a day. And so what happens is that I moved the pulpit down, and then I went down and I sat next to my wife down in front. And then they encouraged me. They wanted me to sit on the stage. And so I moved over there on the side, and they put chairs for me. But I realized that when they put chairs up for me, I began to realize that I was doing the very same thing that I was doing in the pulpit. When you sit up in the pulpit and on Sunday morning and you look out there, you're looking at chairs, you're looking at places that people sat. You go, I wonder what sister so-and-so is. I wonder what so-and-so doing. And you see all kinds of things that you really shouldn't see. And it sometimes affected my spirit, because it was hard for me to, in that moment, go, I am in worship. I need to worship God, and I need not be pastor. Let me look at the numbers on Monday or Tuesday when I got to the office, not start counting and wonder what the offering is going to be and all these different things. And so moving down in the congregation and on the row where we sit, it was important to me because it helped me, one, be able to worship, be able to put my back to everything and go, listen, I'm here for God. And while I have to stand and speak for God, I don't want to be guilty of speaking for God, and I have to spend any time with God in worship. And so have you ever had that struggle as a pastor, trying to get your worship in on Sunday?
Absolutely, and I think that's very crucial and critical, because it may be more important for us to worship than it is for them, because we have a great obligation. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, do you now, being a senior pastor, having served as a senior pastor for a number of years, served in many other capacities, do you still struggle with how the people evaluate you? Because they do. They evaluate all of us. They critique us and all of that other stuff. Do you still, as a pastor, do you still struggle with that? And does that affect the way you worship? Okay.
Yeah, it does. And as Pastor McDaniels was talking about, a lot of things that we feel obligated to do, we feel obligated to do it because we sometimes are afraid of what how the people will respond. And so there are some times when you're standing and preaching, when it comes to anything, basically, like, let's just take for instance, tithing. There's a lot of things that come along with that but you preaching to teach them how their blessing is tied to being generous, and how God has called us to be generous and cheerful givers. And yet many people look at their tithes as, this is my giving, but yet that's not, you're not giving what you already owe. Your generosity comes beyond that. However, but when we stand up to preach and to teach, there are times when we have to preach and teach some things that people are going to, predetermine their worship. And so it's important for us to just stand and declare the word. And we got to get past that. It's difficult, but you got to get past it, because when you look at your people and you begin to realize that you want to see, as a pastor, you want to see your people blessed. You want to see your people experience life and experience Christ and live life, live it more abundantly, or live it, like the translation I love is, live it to the fullest. We want them to do that, but being able to do that means that they have to be obedient. They have to be obedient. They have to care for the gift of a pastor. He said, I'll give you pastors after my own heart. So we're gifts. And so they need to see us as a gift, and they need to begin to honor us as the gift. Not just on the day. I tell pastors all the time, I'll give up that day. If they would love on me like that day every day, I'll give that day up. And I don't need an anniversary. I don't need a new suit. I don't need a new this. I don't need that. Just as Pastor McDaniels mentioned about his lunch, just take care of the needs that the pastor has. And when you do, it makes you a better pastor. You know, when you have the time to study, when you have the time to prepare, when you have the time to pray, and all those things. And I'm going to use that as a safe way into my next question. In Acts chapter 6, verse 4, it talks about the inauguration of deacons. You know, and you mentioned Pastor Dr. Mays writing a book on training deacons and how important deacons are to the church to serve the people, and that they were created and placed in the life of the church in order that the pastor wouldn't have to leave the ministry of prayer and the ministry of preaching to wait on tables. So how do you view that in your context at the Unity Baptist Church? How do you view that in helping the people understand your role as a pastor?
And I think that's very important because, as you know, not only did I have the privilege to learn from that book, but I also actually served as a deacon.
You did.
So I understand the work. I understand the whole.
That's why I was holding that question for you.
Yeah. And so what I do understand, and to me, a lot more learning needs to take place in that area, because really, a pastor during the week, according to that text, should be able to spend the bulk of his time studying the word, praying, and preparing to preach.
That's right.
And the deacon should take care of this business, all of the other business, according to the text. But, we still, in the African American church, we still have not gotten there yet. I still continue to try to teach that. I've tried to train the deacons that I have trained since I've been, to help them to understand that. I had an opportunity to go up on the East Coast and preach in an all-auxiliary day, but it was primarily geared around deacons and trustees and stuff. And I told them, we need to change the way we look at things, We need to change the way we look at things, because if the church would function as it was designed in that text to do, the church would be, we would be miles ahead of where we are right now.
And that's why I think this dialogue is so important, because as I travel, and you and I both, we travel, and as we travel to certain ministries and churches, we find that the pastor's doing way more than he probably needs to. And the congregation doesn't understand how much more they could get out of him if they would take some of the load off of it. And that's why pastors are people too, is important that, when you've been with them and, you go in for revival, you go in for a conference, or you go in just to share with them, and the pastor have to get there early. Then he got to turn all the lights on and turn the alarm off and, straighten the chairs up and make sure everything picked up. And then he got to make sure that he talks to every auxiliary that morning, and the door is swinging back and forth. And then everybody leaves. Then he got to walk through and pick up the papers and the programs and, and the trash and, and maybe even clean the bathroom before he leaves. And that's the real life of a lot of pastors. They have so much that they have to do. They got to pick up people and, transport people to church. And they say, Pastor, stay here in the office and you relax. I got to run so-and-so home and I got to do all these different things, when the church ought to be working together in partnership. It's not just the pastor is not the only one that's called to ministry. He's called to the ministry of preaching and prayer, but the ministry of caring for one another and loving one another and holding one another up and serving one another.
That's the deacon's job.
Yeah.
That's the deacon's job.
And the congregation's job. Yeah.
Because the congregation, like you said, it all fits together. as one complete whole. But, you know, and if the deacons would do their role, and part of their role in serving the congregation is also helping to teach the congregation, you know, not to put too much burden on the pastor. That's part of their function. Don't put that weight on the pastor. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we do well is that the deacons will tell the families in the church, don't call the pastor directly, you call us. And if there's a need, we'll go to the pastor. But, you know, see, a lot of times that's a big struggle because people feel like that I have a right to just pick up my phone or text or call or whatever, you know, no matter what he's doing, no matter what's going on, he's my pastor.
With the expectation that you ought to. No matter what you're doing, you ought like we walk around with our phones in our hands all the time. And but it's important. You mentioned, you asked me, you know, about the struggle and about the educational church, and the Lord had given me a commission several years ago that this is our third year, maybe 4 years that we've been dealing with the Book of Acts in the fall, and we deal with the Book of Acts verse by verse, and paragraph by paragraph, chapter by chapter, helping them understand what New Testament church looks like. A lot of times people have gotten their idea of church, and not only about church, but they got their idea about a pastor from, it was handed down. And it was handed down by their parents and their parents' parents. Or, you know, maybe they came from a church that was in a rural area. And so that pastor was able to do a lot more because they were there. But then now with being here and pastoring in this day and time, there's a lot of other things that pastors are involved with, because we talk about the ministry of the church, in the ministry of prayer and the ministry of preaching. But then what about the community? What about the community issues that we face, you know, here in our city when we talk about politics, and we talk about policing, and we talk about, you know, gentrification, and we talk about, you know, just in our own community right now, there's a lack of a grocery store. And a lot of times people look to the leadership of the church to handle those things. And so if you're doing all of those things, then you're pretty spread out, pretty thin. And so being able to bring it back to the biblical model of the church and church leadership and church discipline and church membership is important.
And that's very, very important, because like you said, one of the other things too, and of course we do, I just did a community thing a couple of weeks ago that's important to the community, although it wasn't personally that important to me. But across the street from our location in the park, they were having a pet thing. And so they asked if they could use our parking lot. And you know, you have to accommodate, you know, you have a whole lot of different things that you have to do in the community. But also, I tell people all the time, because I believe that part of my calling was not just to my church, but also to denominational work. And so when you are involved with denominational work, whether it be in the district or in the state, it spreads you pretty thin. You know, when you've got this obligation and that obligation and this person contacting you and pulling, you know, it spreads you pretty thin, plus your civic responsibility and your community responsibility. And I don't believe that the people have a working knowledge of what that feels like. You know, I made a statement just a couple of weeks ago that I wish that everybody in our church, especially the leaders, could spend 1 week doing what I do. If you just spend 1 week doing what I do, you'd have a different attitude.
Well, thank you, Pastor Woodberry. We are just so grateful and thankful for Pastor Woodberry and Pastor McDaniels for taking their time to be with us today. on Pastors Are People too. I really, really hope that you understand how important this is, and how just being able to eavesdrop, just being able to peek into the pastor's office is important, and how it can be vital in your life as a Christian is that it gives you a prayer list to begin to pray. You've heard these pastors share from their heart about their struggle with the church, their responsibilities at the church and their responsibility at home, the marriages in the church, how important they are in their own marriages, their children, and all of those things. And if we understand how important those things are, then it's important for us to pray for them. But not only just pray for them, but also put some feet on the prayers that we're praying, and do everything that we can to partner with the pulpit, because we understand that if there's going to be power in the pulpit, that preaching power that we need to have in our churches across this world, we need powerful proclamation in the pulpit. And the only way that's going to come to be is there got to be tremendous prayers in the pews, but then it needs to be directed prayers in the pews, not just an overall brush of praying. No, we want you to pray the same way you want your pastor to pray for you and your marriage and your children and your health and your finances. Then we want to encourage you to do the same, but not only just do that, but be a blessing to them. And so this is Pastors Are People too. We're here every other Monday, and in 2 weeks we'll be back sharing with you some more insight in the life and the ministry of the pastor, being able to help us understand why it's important for us to pray for our pastors. I want you to do me a favor, and I just want to thank each and every one of you for watching. But if you'll just do us a favor, it will go a long way, and that is that as soon as we get off of here and we close out our time together in prayer, I want you to just hit that share button, and I want you to share that with all of your followers and your friends on Facebook. If you are over a small group or a Sunday school class or maybe a ministry, that you'll share it with a few people in your church too, so they get a kind of idea of what's going on with their pastor, and they can make a difference where you are. We're doing what we're doing here in order for you to make a difference where you are, because I believe that if we make a difference where you are, that we're all on the same team. We may meet at different locations in different cities and have different ministries, but we are all a part of God's family, and that because we are part of God's family, whatever we do and we can help and share with you will be a blessing. So make sure you share, make sure you comment, make sure that you get connected with the ministry. Pastor, if you're watching this and you say, man, I need to have that conversation in my church or my city and my Ministers Alliance, or at my Congress, my district or state Congress, then just connect with us. My staff will put the website on there, how you can get in contact with us, that we can be there to help support you in every way that we can. We are pushing forward now, and I want you to start saving the date for 31 Days of Praying for Pastors, August of 2020. It's going to be amazing what God is going to do in the life of our churches that month. And so we want you to begin to look toward the registration, save the date, begin to prepare your church and your congregation and your prayer team to begin to pray for your pastor for that entire month. We're going to do it in the month of August this year, and we're going to do it in the month of October this year. They both have 31 days. We're going to be praying for them. So we thank you so much again for doing that, and I'm looking to my wonderful, capable assistant to see if I've shared everything I need to share. All right. Let me close with a word of prayer today. Father, I thank you now, Lord, for just this time together. Lord, how we honor you with the efforts and our transparency and our openness today. We've only done it, Lord, for you to get the glory and honor, not for any fame nor fortune on our behalf, but Father, because we believe that we are part of your eternal kingdom, Father. And Lord, whatever we can do to help and encourage and to strengthen churches around the world, we pray that we'll be able to do so. I pray for every pastor right now, Lord, who is connected to this this ministry. I pray for those who may just stumble upon this, Father, that they'll be able, Lord, to get connected, that they may be able to further their ministry much further than they could ever do without this information. Father, help with the partnership in their churches between pulpit and pew, congregation and clergy, and minister and membership. Father, I pray that you will help us understand that we're in this together. And then when the pastor wins, we'll win together. When the arms of Moses was lifted up, the Bible says that Joshua and the army began to overtake the Amalekites and began to win in Rephidim. And so I pray right now, Lord, that we'll be able to see that in the life of the church, that we're in a battle in the valleys where we live, but you and only you can give us victory when we are interceding and listening to you. Give us the power that we need to continue to preach and lead your churches. And then, Lord, give the membership the responsibility to pray, undergird the pastor, and then live out the life that they need to live out as members. We thank you now and we love you. And it's in Jesus' holy and precious name we pray. Amen and praise God. God bless you. We'll see you soon.